Events like this make all the difference.
To bring this kind of event to students, it's something that we at the Cable Center also work hard to do, to bring together people and ideas to advance innovation.
I promise you, you have what it takes, and what you don't know today, you will learn, and someday you're going to stand on a stage like this and teach it to somebody else.
You need a champion. You need somebody who can talk you up to the boss or who can give you opportunities to let you shine.
We rebranded this year from One Day Immersion, which is what this day used to be called, to One Diverse Industry, to recognize, frankly, the work that we've already been doing, which is helping people from really diverse backgrounds come together and meet powerful people in media and learn how to get into it.
You're accountable for your own life. What kind of impact do I want to leave behind? And so I kind of feel like I'm able to kind of live the impact that I want to create.
Hey everybody, how are we doing? Paul Bukowski here, ODI, One Diverse Industry, highlighting the barrier breakers of today to influence tomorrow's. We're back today as we were yesterday and as we will be tomorrow and Thursday and Friday in person at Fordham if you're around New York, and also streaming virtually. Thank you everybody for joining. We got a great, fun day for you today, and I'll be holding your hand through the entire 2.5 hours, so no need to be scared. We're going to start things off with the panel between myself, Emma Weiss, who's the assistant to the co-chairman at Disney, and Jazz Pitcairn, who's a writer, producer. She wrote on Black Lady Sketch Show. She produced at Vogue. And we got a lot of fun stuff today. So stick around. We got some executive assistants. We have costumes, producers, directors, a writer, all that fun jazz. So stick around a little bit. I promise it won't be that long. And please feel free to hit us up with questions on our Instagram at onediverseindustry.org. That's onediverseindustry.org. And yeah, let us know some questions and enjoy the show. Welcome, everybody. The One Diverse Industry 2024 conference. I'm joined here by Emma Weiss, currently assistant to co-chairman at Disney. She's assistant at CAA, intern at HBO or Max, however you feel like calling it today, amongst many others, UTA, Fox, Imagine, and many, many, many others. And as well as Jazz Pitcairn, writer and producer. She recently wrote on the Black Lady Sketch Show. She was an associate producer at Vogue and Hulu. She's interned at A24, HBO, NBC, and also many others. The LinkedIn is just extensive. I myself am Paul Bukowski, and welcome everybody. Emma and Jazz, how we doing?
Good. That was
doing great.
Yeah, what a nice introduction.
Oh, thank you.
Truly.
Long and hard on that one. Well, thank you guys. Thank you guys for coming. Let's just start off. Why don't each of you just walk us through the career, shape your individual worlds for us real quick. Jazz, why don't we start with you? Kind of take us from college to the now.
Sure. So I'm Jazz. I'm from the Cayman Islands, and I've always been interested in being a filmmaker, writing and directing for TV or films. And so I went to NYU and studied film and television there. while I was at NYU, I really wanted to take advantage of living in a city that had production and do as many internships as I could. With the context being that as an international student, like I would have to get a visa and all that kind of stuff after graduating to actually work in the US in film and television. So I knew getting internships is really important, and that's why I like put a lot of effort into interning in as many places as I did. I just want to preface that I don't necessarily think you have to go overkill on internships, but I did end up doing 5 different internships. I worked at CNBC, CBS, Bravo, HBO, and then A24 in various different departments, ranging from like marketing, distribution, casting, whatever, whoever would take me. And then after that, I got an assistant gig. I worked as an assistant to a producer and director on the Apple series Dickinson, which was a great experience getting to be on set and learning a lot from a director, doing something that I was very interested in. And then I got a job as a writer's assistant on a Black Lady sketch show for season 3, and was later promoted to be a full-time writer for season 4. And that's where we're at now.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jazz. And how long were you a writer's assistant before they hired you as a full-time writer?
For 1 season.
For 1 season?
For season.
Nice. Very cool. The questions are already arising in my head, and I can already tell that I'm going to skew away from the outline I gave you guys yesterday. All right, Emma, go for it. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I will. I definitely have questions too. That's amazing. So, for me, I'm from New Jersey. I always love stories, love reading. I went to Brown for college and I joined my sophomore year this big student-run film festival that we have called Ivy Film Festival. And that's when I first started learning kind of like what the entertainment industry was, and kind of just took the opportunity to talk to as many people as I possibly could who were even like tangentially involved in the industry. I talked to writers assistants, development assistants, like agents, anyone I could, to just try to learn as much as I could. Applied to like every single internship that I possibly could, which I definitely agree with Jazz. I think it definitely was a bit of overkill, but for me, I just was like really looking to like take advantage of whatever opportunity I possibly could get. And from all of those like conversations and applications, I ended up interning for a summer out in LA for Funny or Die and Gary Sanchez Productions, which is how I met Paul. And I also interned at Imagine in their TV department and at Fox in like the comedy and drama development and current programming departments. And that's when I fell in love with development. Like I kind of had a vague idea of what it was from just talking to people, but I found that like once I actually was kind of like in the room, I just loved it, just being able to, be a part of storytelling and help people, like Jazz, just do whatever I can to like help tell those kinds of stories. And it was just a really kind of cool opportunity as an intern to kind of like be in those different spaces and just kind of like learn as much as I could. And that's kind of just where it jump started for me. Like I felt very lucky having those opportunities and just kept in touch with whoever I could, just kind of to see hopefully like what experience I could have next. And throughout college, I did some more internships. The fall after that, I actually would commute from college to New York to serve as like an onset and office PA on a CBS show, because I really wanted to be able to see what production was like and learn about it. And that was amazing and allowed me to kind of see a totally different perspective. And I think helped me to understand the development process a lot more, just getting that kind of different perspective. And then the following summer, COVID hit. I was going to come out to LA and do more internships, but I ended up kind of doing similar to what I did originally, like just reaching out to whoever I could, trying to do what I could to like have a chance to learn and work with whoever was, still offering internships. So I ended up working for Emma Roberts' production company, which was an amazing experience, very like hands-on, very much in the nitty-gritty in a way that my other experience hadn't been. So that was really awesome. And I interned at Filmation, and Perfect Storm, which is Justin Lin's production company in their TV department. And through just like keeping in touch and everything, like Paul said, I ended up interning virtually with HBO Max my senior year of college, which was amazing. Similar to my experience at Fox, it was just very cool being able to see what the buyer side was like, and just getting the chance to kind of learn even, virtually, which I think is a great way. I think they're still doing virtual internships, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but for me, it was like a very lucky way that I could be, in school in Rhode Island and still get that chance. And then from there, I graduated in 2021 and started almost right after I moved out to LA, and I started working at CAA for an MP talent agent, which was very different kind of from the experiences that I had before, but I loved it. I'm sure we'll talk more about this later, but for me it was like another way to just like learn a totally different kind of side of things. And then from there, after I worked for him for a few months, I worked for the head of our MPLit department. And then I went over to Disney, where I've been working for a year now.
Hell yeah, that's great. That's really great. And I want to stop real quick to double tap on sort of the methodology behind like the networking and keeping in touch with people that each of you mentioned, and the sort of seeing different parts of the industry, right? Like Jazz, you mentioned there's one thing you did on the distribution side, and then marketing, and then a director, and then Emma, you said from the point of being at HBO and on the buyer side, and through the agency route, and through the production company. So each of you really got to dive deep into each sector of what makes up the business, with your own like respective career goals, and kind of just like expand on that in terms of the two arms of that, which is how you go about networking. Who do you sort of reach out to? How do you start networking? I always tell people, like, just don't reach out like a psychopath and just reach out to a million people you don't care about. Like, reach out to one person that you actually have invested interest in what they're doing. So how do you guys like go about identifying who are the best people to collaborate with or network with, and then also in turn how those people can also snowball into the different opportunities around the business, and why those different opportunities are important?
Yeah. So I would say this is a big question.
This is a lovely question.
I think at the time, and it sounds like Emma and I had a very similar, like, at least approach to just knowing that we wanted to work in entertainment, is that the entertainment industry is so large. And I think, at least for me, when I was like, oh, I want to be a writer and director, like, I didn't appreciate how many different jobs it took to build up the entertainment industry, how many different sort of like pockets of spaces there are to be a creative in the entertainment industry that's not just being a writer, director, producer. There are so many different departments, people, aspects, skills that are used, and they all work as one at the end of the day to get to finished product. And so for me, I just wanted any foot in the door to be in entertainment. Like, at the end of the day, like, I knew I wanted to be a writer and director, but I also knew that could be 20 years before I actually get my first shot. So like, what am I going to do now to just start getting my foot in the door and then excelling at whatever that was whatever room it was that I found myself in. So for my first internship, I had zero experience, again, not from America, didn't know anybody. I went to NYU, which, to be fair, is a great school. A lot of professors are connected, and that's certainly where I started my networking, is with the people around you, both your peers. Like, networking across from you is really important, but also staying in touch with professors. Like, they're all people who've been in the industry. They all know different people. I always like to say that, like, a lot of my first internships, a lot of my first jobs came from a business class that I took. And sorry, let me backtrack. For my first job, my first two jobs, I got them because a professor recommended me to the people that were hiring. And that professor was like a business professor who I would not have assumed knew all these like film industry people. Like, I would have thought that like a film professor would like be the one that helped me get my foot in the door. But it was actually someone who was like a marketing professor, class had nothing really to do with like film, but I stayed in touch with him anyway, because what's the harm in staying in touch with cool people and professors that you get along with? And that's actually the person that opened the doors for me. And so I think that just staying really open-minded, like be kind to everybody, be open to all the different types of opportunities that might come your way. When I was approaching interning, I didn't just think like, oh, I want to be in development, or oh, I want to be in this and I'm only applying to these internships. Like I applied everywhere. I didn't care if it was unpaid, I didn't care if it was paid. I didn't care what I'd have to do to make that happen. I would email companies that didn't even have internship programs, just out of the like, maybe they would hire somebody if I said I would work for free for school credit or whatever. So I, for my first internship, probably sent over 100 emails, put myself into the ether. I only got one, and that one happened to be CNBC. And so that was just one of those like strokes of luck where like it just kind of worked out in that way. But for every single internship, it was the same thing. Send 100 emails. It didn't really matter that I was starting to gain experience in my experience. I still was getting a ton of rejection. I was still getting a ton of no's. And I just kept pushing through, and then it just kind of, you end up where you're supposed to. At the end of the day, rejection is something that comes with it. And so, and then in those different internships, wherever you land, staying in touch with people is really important. Again, even if like I did a casting internship at CBS, like I have zero interest in acting. I had no interest in casting in general, but I was just like, why not? Like, we'll see what happens. And then last year I was making a short film, and I got COVID like 5 days before we were supposed to shoot. And so my actress, who is more or less like a named actress, had to drop out of the film. And I had 1 week to ask somebody else with like right before Christmas. And I reached out to my friends at CBS Casting, and I was like, what do I do to try and cast like another real actress? And they gave me the whole breakdown of what to do, who to reach out to, how to do it. And I ended up casting Sasha Lane, who was starred in American Honey, in my short film. So that was just an example of how like a connection that I didn't think would matter, but I stayed in touch with them anyway, ended up saving my ass like 3 years later. Anyway, that's what.
Well, that's very cool. CBS. Damn. Good for you, Jazz. No, that's great. Emma, how about you over there?
That is so amazing. I truly second everything Jazz said. I had a very similar experience where like I went to a college where I was lucky. Like there was a couple professors, like I studied film and business, but our film major was like very philosophy heavy, very theoretical. And there wasn't like, the kind of pipeline that you might have at like a USC or like even a more like production focused school, like a Northwestern. So it was very much like I had the chance to learn a bit through the festival that we did, but it was very much kind of like what Jazz described. I did not care. Like I just talked to whoever I could. I probably applied also to like over 100 things. I sent in emails that I knew were not going to any human who was going to read them. Like I just, I think it's like you just have to use like the hunger that you have and like the excitement that you have, and know that like, ultimately down the line, like it's not necessary in terms of like your original question, Paul, about like how to kind of focus your keeping in touch and your networking. When you're starting off, like I think for me, at least I was casting just a huge wide net because I had a lot to learn and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And it was the best way for me to like, get lucky. Cause I think a lot of this, it's like chance, it's luck, but it's also like perseverance, hard work, and being willing to like send a million things and take the time to do that, even though it would be a lot easier not to. Because I think ultimately down the line, I just totally agree with Jazz. Like for me, I think about like my first job was at CAA, and I definitely like my experience before that. I was lucky, like I had TV internships and I loved them and I knew I wanted to work in TV most likely. But this was like post-COVID, like I was really hungry to just try to get any job I could. And so like having the chance to work for a motion picture talent agent was definitely not, as someone who probably thought they wanted to do TV development, not exactly how I like thought maybe like where I would be working initially, but I was so excited to learn. I was so excited for the opportunity. And kind of like what Jazz said, like you never know what's going to be helpful down the line. And now, like, I'm back working in TV, but I still find so much of what I learned from that job, like in a lot of different ways, has been truly invaluable. And the same thing with like internships that I've done that might have not been quite lining up with what I thought I wanted to do, or people that I've talked to. And that's the thing, too. Like, I think the best piece of advice, like one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got, that Jazz said, is just being kind to everyone. Like, you just, and, you know, as a human being, but also in terms of like networking, like you just never know kind of where you'll be, where someone else will be. And I think that's just super important. And just like maintaining relationships, especially even when there's no like benefit to you. Like that's a big thing too, is like it can be hard when you're so busy and you know you're a student, but like I think a great piece of advice I got was just, if you can, just try to stay in touch. And it doesn't have to be constantly, but a lot of like, you know, these people are very used to people checking in when they need something, which isn't to say don't do that. You definitely, you know, have to speak up and ask for things. But when you stay in touch kind of regularly, and, you know, it might just to be to congratulate someone on like, you know, a show that came out, or like their film came out, or not even saying anything, just saying like, hi, I'm checking in, like happy holidays. Like, I think that means a lot to people because, you know, they're just very used to kind of being checked in only when someone needs something, which is human nature and is also, you know, like I said, fine. But I think that's like advice that I've gotten that I think has been super helpful. And like, you know, it will be helpful, like, you know, your whole career when you're a student and when you graduate.
Yeah,
I agree.
I totally agree. Jazz, you were saying something to cut you off?
Oh no, I was just gonna say I agree, and I was just thinking also when you were talking about like being a psychopath, like honestly, I would say you probably do need to be a bit of a psychopath. Like if there's anything you're hearing from Emma and I, it's that we cast a wide net, like we made it a job to apply to jobs. And I think like
Yeah.
it is hard work. It's annoying. It sucks to get rejections. Like you're not alone in feeling that way. It is 100% like you will send over 100 emails and maybe hear back from one or two people, but at the end of the day, like you're the one creating these opportunities for yourself. Like you're the one planting the seed for anything to potentially come back to you, and you're not going to know where things are going to hit. And that's just like life in general. Like as I'm sure like people watching like know and have experienced in their own ways. But even things like I was thinking for my A24 internship, like A24 is a very hard place to get an internship. Like all film bros and everyone loves it. They want to work there. And my approach, I had applied for every single semester, been rejected every single semester in so many different departments. And ultimately, like I ended up in international distribution because I reached out to like, you know, like how in job descriptions it's like, oh, you'll be reporting to the senior whatever of this department. That's who the senior whatever was of that department. And I just like LinkedIn DM'd her, as I've done many other people, by the way, who like didn't respond. But in this case, she was really, her name's Sasha, she's very kind. And she responded to the, like, it was just a message saying, hey, I applied, I'm really interested, I just wanted to, you know, re-express that interest to you directly. And what that did was she was like, oh, okay, cool, like I'll like flag it to HR. So at the very least, like that meant that my resume was now going to be picked out of the hundreds, maybe even thousands of people that applied to A24 and at least get a second read. And that at least helped me get into the second interview process. And from there on, you get a chance to really shine. But it's like doing those little things that end up separating you from the pack of people. And so it's definitely worth it to reach out to individual hiring managers as opposed to just reaching out to recruiters. Like I remember once an HBO recruiter told me that she had over 500 LinkedIn DMs sitting in her inbox right now. Like those recruiters get a lot of messages, and it's not to say that it wouldn't always like break through, but sometimes you do have to like take the extra step and message people who work in that department. Like just be like, hey, like who would be the hiring manager of this? Who's your boss? Like what are like other people I can actually talk to that are actually making the decisions, you know?
Yeah, sorry, Paul, I know I'm totally just jumping in here, but that just reminded me, and I feel like I briefly mentioned this, but what Jess is saying now too, like I found that to be true too with like for me, I cast that, huge net and like got, lucky and got my internships. But a lot of the jobs I had after that were all through people I met through my initial internships. So like that too, you'll probably find if you can keep in touch with the people you meet in your like initial job, whether it's directly related to what you want to do or not, they might know someone who knows someone who knows someone. Like you might take a job and think it's not really the job that you want, but the person you work for, if you like, give it your all and do whatever you can, like that person might be close with someone who's working for the company you really want to work for. And like all of that I experienced, and I felt super lucky. But I think that that's like a good thing to keep in mind when you're dying after sending in like a million emails and like getting rejection after rejection. Is like all you really need is like honestly one opportunity, and then give it your all, and like from there so much can end up happening. So it sounds kind of corny, but just truly like sticking with it if you're passionate and like not giving up, and knowing truly that like a lot of the people that you might be like, wow, like they're amazing, like they have an amazing job, like they also had the door slammed in their face 1,000 times. And like often the secret for success, or like the secret to getting a great job, it's truly just like getting back up again and trying again, and like not letting it kind of affect you or make you feel like you can never reach whatever it is that you want to. All of which I know sounds super corny, but I do believe in that.
It's so true though. Whenever because I did the same stuff you guys did. I actually never got one job from applying, or one internship from applying. It always ended up being somebody I had connected with on LinkedIn who ended up helping me get an internship. Or with Funny or Die, in Emma and I's case, I called them and they had never had anybody call them on the phone. They're like, why are you calling us about internships? But it ended up turning out okay. But yeah, I think the power of just LinkedIn, and what I meant by psychopath is more so like to Emma's point of like not using people, like don't only hit people up when you need something from them. Like that's pretty transparent in terms of what you're doing. But in terms of like what Jazz is saying, in a psychopath way, being so investigative on like LinkedIn and job searches, you do need to do those things. Like, I tell students now, and I did this back in the day all the time, is like every week, make it, like you guys said, your job to go into those applications, see who that hiring manager is, and then kind of reach out to them, send out 10 to 20 to 30 LinkedIn messages a week, and make that a habit, and then make like a goal of 5 or so networking calls a week. Like that's now your part-time job, is just the networking, the getting foot in doors and feet in things and all that jazz. Like you have to make that like the staple of every week, aside from sending in the internship applications, because it's very easy to get a little bit unhappy with yourself, or just kind of like down when you get all those applications rejected. But then you have one call with somebody and your spirits kind of rise a little bit. You're like, oh, well, this went really well, and I'm excited to see what happens here. So I think all that's just great, really insightful information stuff. God, I was like a maniac doing those things. And I tell a lot of people to still do today. But going back to sort of between decisions, between, the stepping stones of your guys' career, I know we're talking a lot about when the doors open and the moments that they've closed. Were there any sort of inhibitors within your guys' careers that kind of stutter step the process, and like challenges, so to speak? And could you guys share how you got around that, whether it be Jazz with your visa, or Emma, if you had anything else come up?
Okay, I'll go first. I would say I mentioned this earlier, but my biggest inhibitor is definitely the fact that I'm an international student. I'm not American. I can't just work anywhere I'd like to. And so for me, that meant that like I had to stay very focused on only working in entertainment and like really developing that. In order to work in the US post-graduation in entertainment, you have to get what's called an O1 visa. And in order to get that visa, you need to literally prove that you are quote unquote extraordinary in your field, which means you need a lot of concrete evidence to say that you are the best of the best and therefore worth people like, giving you a work visa to be here. And so as like someone who's going to college, you're 18, 19, you don't have any experience, like how are you supposed to prove that you're extraordinary in 4 years while you're in college and all that other stuff? And so for me, that was always at the back of my mind. I also couldn't like, I had to wait until the summer going into my junior year to even start doing any internships because I wasn't allowed to just work. I couldn't just take on an unpaid internship just because, or I couldn't get a paid one. It had to be for school credit. And then when you only allowed you to do it for school credit if you were a junior. And so I couldn't do anything my first 2 years. And then the second they did allow me to start doing internships, that's when I kind of just like, I think that's also, I was a little crazy where I was like, I need to do as many as I can and did one every semester in summer until I graduated so that I could say like, oh, I produced X amount of videos for Bravo for their website. As yes, I was an intern, but I was doing like I was, producing videos. And that was more or less how I started to build my portfolio of work. The fact that I was interning at places where you could Google like CNBC and find, a bunch of videos that I'd edited. Yes, they were real estate videos that, they hand to interns and all that kind of stuff, but it was work. And so that was a huge thing. I think also once I graduated and was now looking for work, needing a visa was an issue because nobody wanted, like people want people that can stay at their company for a long time. And so once you graduate, you have a year of what's called OPT. All the international students in here are all going, yes, we know, it's crazy. But it's like you have a year to essentially work that doesn't have as many inhibitors on you. You can do what you want, but that's your year to like make some sort of footing so that someone else will then sponsor you for a visa the following year. But in entertainment, nobody wants to do that because lots of work is freelance anyway. Like you're not working somewhere for 10 plus years unless you're on the like more industry business side at an agency. And if that is where they're going, they don't want to hire someone that they're then going to have to sponsor a visa for in the next year. So that then became an issue. And it's kind of for that reason also that working the more freelance lifestyle ended up being better for me in the sense that no one cared if I couldn't work for them a year from now. They just needed me for 4 months and like that was that. So that's what I did then. In that time, I was able to like the director I assisted on Dickinson, he then brought me on to assist him on his other projects that he had in development at Hulu, at a few other places, and brought me on as an associate producer by title. And so that also helped build that, portfolio. But then I was able to get the visa, yay, 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 except now I can only work in the United States as a writer or producer. And that is a difficult thing. I've never worked as a writer before. Any sort of producing I'd done had been more at the like really assistant level. So it's hard to just get a job as a producer. It's hard to just get a job as a writer. And so at that point, I was also like, okay, well, I can keep being an assistant. And I had really great opportunities to assist some A-list celebrities. And despite getting the job, ultimately, I couldn't actually take the jobs because there's like gray areas when it comes to like big studios hiring assistants when they are on a visa, even if they don't have to sponsor it. And so I got like 3 or 4 different jobs, Disney, personal assistants to celebrities, all these people who individually didn't care that I had a visa. But when it came down to it, like the big studios were like, well, she's on a visa, like we'd rather you just hire someone local or whatever. And so I got a lot of job offers rescinded. And that was kind of like the pattern, which was a huge inhibitor because like, what am I gonna do? I ultimately like started working for a more like independent production studio at the time. And I kind of worked with them on, smaller projects. And then a Black Lady sketch show did end up promoting me to be a writer, which allowed me to actually get that first writing job and, move on from there. And so thankfully, I'm in like a more positive situation now, but it's certainly like at every single step was an issue. I mean, even now, like with the writer's strike, a lot of people have side hustles. A lot of people are doing other things. I can't go and work as a bartender even if I wanted to. Like I'm literally not allowed to. I can't, like the only thing I'm allowed to do is write and produce, and I can't really produce anything right now. And so that becomes like the biggest inhibitor. It forces you to be very financially sound with like any money that you make. Like you have to be really responsible about that. But also like I do get to do what I love. Like, I am in a good position, all things considered. So it's difficult. Like every single step of the way, there was like a problem, but hopefully it'll work out in the end.
And real quick, I want to hear from you too, Emma. Jazz, have you felt that, because how long have you been like, let's call job seeking, or what, and also in consideration of internships in entertainment? Would you say 4 5 years, 6 years?
Yeah, I mean, really, like anyone who's interested in entertainment starts looking for jobs the second they can work. So that's like
Yeah.
16 even. You're doing like whatever you can. Personally, I'm from Cayman Islands. There's not really a or there wasn't a film industry there when I was in high school, so that wasn't really an option. Going to college is when I started looking for those jobs, but ultimately I couldn't get any of them until I was going into my junior year. So I probably was 20 when I really started the like, I can actually work, like I'm going to do this now, and I'm 24 now. So
In the
4
last
years, yeah.
4 years, I know that's not an extreme amount of time, but have you seen anything change in terms of, like, I know you're talking about the complications between people wanting to even consider, so like, you getting jobs, and then when they're like, we have to sponsor a visa, they're like, oh, never mind, like too much to deal with. Has that did that shift or change at all to give you more access in 4 years, or no, they just
I don't think so. I mean,
there's little to no groundwork being done on that front to try to keep it as simple as possible?
and it's like, no, and to be fair, like I get it from the business side, right? Like you want to stay as cheap and quick as possible. Hiring people who aren't from the US is not cheap or quick for the most part. And so I get it from that perspective. You would think like as I have more credits and all that stuff, it might be a little easier. I mean, I've only written for the one show, to be seen what the future kind of holds for me in that realm. The writer strike hit, within 6 months of me finishing writing for the show. And of course, I was making my short film and stuff, so I wasn't even looking for writing work at the time. So yeah, to be seen, but I don't think like I would be surprised, like positively surprised, if someone were to tell me as an international student they had a better experience looking for internships and then jobs after college. Yeah.
Fair, 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 fair. All right, Emma, what are you thinking over there?
Very, very different scale of things. But one thing Jazz said that I experienced too was just the issue with the academic internships and like academic credit, which I've heard from a lot of students can be a barrier too. I remember some kids that we interned with, Paul, like that it's tough because not every school like will let you get an academic credit for an internship, but a lot of these internships are unpaid. So like legally the only way that you can do them is to get an academic credit. But I some schools do that, some don't, some make it easy, some don't. My college, like that didn't really exist. I had to go down this like crazy rabbit hole chase to try to figure out like how I could do one of the first internships that I had, I think it was for Funny or Die, where it was for academic credit, because otherwise I couldn't get the experience, which seems crazy because I was so willing to work for free, like, and so many are, but they literally, it's like them basically telling you like, you can't do that. Like, it's just, and it's like a very kind of bureaucratic process. So I just had to spend like a lot of time literally like going around my campus, knocking on different like department doors, trying to figure out like who could help me try to figure it out. I got very lucky. Ultimately, I ended up being able to like work with one of my professors and make like an independent study and like do it that way. But it was definitely not really like, it wasn't an easy thing. And, another slight kind of like hiccup I had to figure out was when COVID hit, I had like, was lucky. I had, spent a lot of time trying to like secure these 2 internships I was very excited about. Then they were both canceled. And so it was like May, which I know was an experience of a lot of students. And it was, whatever, like May 2020. And I had to figure it out. I want, more so than even like having a name on my resume, I just wanted to be able to like learn and participate in what I had loved doing before. So I, reached out to a ton of people. But because of COVID and everything going on, almost all the internships that were still existing were unpaid for academic credit. So it was just the same thing where I kind of had to figure out how to make that happen. And also figure out like how I could find the people who are still offering internships, because it definitely was very tricky. And like the one, some companies kept theirs, most didn't. Like it was very kind of random. So that whole just figuring out everything kind of through that process, I think was a little bit tricky. And in the long run, like kind of what we were discussing before, I ended up doing internships that I probably wouldn't have guessed I would have done, but they all led to me getting my first job through like random chance things. Like I met this one person who I had like met through my internship, who then like knew someone else who knew someone else, who when I met someone else randomly right before I graduated, like they put in a word and that's how I got my job. Like it all, which is I think like ties back to some of the advice we were talking about earlier, but I think the academic credit thing, I think might be something that some students run into. And I know it can be a bit tricky.
Yeah, I remember when I was doing my second internship at Palm Star Media National Lampoon, after doing Funny or Die, there was like only one class that I could take as like course credit, or one internship I could apply as course credit. And then for these next two internships, it was like, well, you can't, you don't have any more credits to send an internship toward. And I was like talking to my advisor on the phone, and I'm like, wait, what's happening here? How is it that I'm trying to work for free? And I'm willing to get paid and put countless hours into this internship and give it my all. Yet somehow just there's a technicality that says that I can't give them my labor for free. Like what? So it can be very like, discerning, but I think that's fair to say, because you do a lot of times, like what my advisor did, similar to how you pivoted, Emma, was like we kind of your school, depending on where you're at, may be kind of quick on their feet, and they can develop like little like loopholes, so to speak, even though that has a negative connotation to it, but like little ways to pivot to like help you succeed. So like, if you get let known that like, hey, you can't do this, definitely ask about it, because I remember I was just going crazy about it. I was like, there's how am I not allowed to give these people my free labor? Which is just it's too much. But there's always like little ways you can kind of just navigate and stutter step. But I know we're coming close to the end of our time, and I think I could sit here with Jazz and Emma, you guys, for probably the next 45 minutes, as you saw my list of questions yesterday, and there's many to go. But since you only give me so much time, we'll wrap it up on this one. Each of you, and Emma, we'll go to you first this time. If there's one piece of advice you could offer, let's say your 19-year-old self, what would you say?
That's such a great question. I think it's tough. I think like, I think actually I would say something someone told me a long time ago, which I think is helpful, and it sounds kind of vague, but just like the importance of listening and like learning. Like, because all of us are like super, like we have goals, like we're applying a million times to try to get somewhere. We're networking 3 times a week. Like all of us have ambitions and like end goals that we want to reach, which, is totally important. But along the way, I just have found that like when I'm in situations or jobs or, internships where it might feel like it's not directly like, leading you to whatever that end goal is, like just try to learn as much as you can. And it sounds kind of like simple, but truly just being open to like learning and being open to, this is something we touched on too, but just being open to things, not like being okay if things don't turn out the way that you thought. Like the big thing I've learned is you just literally never know how things are going to work out. You don't know what job's going to lead to another job, like who you might meet, who might lead you to something. Like you just never know. And so when the door is like shut in your face, or you don't get the job, or like you get the job and it's not what you thought, just like give yourself a break, focus on learning what you can from the experience, and know that truly like half the battle is just dealing with stuff when it goes wrong. Like, I mean, like Jazz is an insanely incredible example of that. Like she literally, everything was against her constantly, but look at, like, she is incredible, and it's because, you know, in part I think it's just like give yourself a break and kind of just like, yeah, be okay with like not knowing necessarily what's going to happen, and if things aren't, you know, going to whatever plan you might have thought that they would be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. That was so nice, Emma. Thank you.
Oh my God, no, it's true.
But and same to you also. Like it's really awesome doing these sorts of panels because you get to meet such like awesome, cool people that again, like this is networking for Emma and I, honestly. Like we get to like meet someone else that's like really cool.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. I think I would say don't compare yourself to other people is probably one of my biggest pieces of advice. It's so there's no tried and true way to get from point A to point B in terms of like what it is that you want, what your dreams are, and everyone's path is completely different. Everybody has different sets of connections, like interests, skills, strengths, like whatever that may look like. And so it's really easy to like feel like when you're still in school, like, how am I going to get my first job? And like, what do I want that first job to be? And, you know, this person got this awesome internship at this place, or this person, you know, just sold a film to HBO, like their, you know, freshman year short film. Like, I'm not, you know, like, I think that it's so easy to like compare yourself to other people and then feel discouraged because of that. And so I would just say, like, remember that everyone's on their own journey. They all have their own set of problems. I promise you. And you know that shouldn't deter from your own ambitions and you know from you achieving your goal regardless of what other people are doing. And if anything, like just like as I said like before, like network across the hall from like people around you, like learn from other people. Like as Emma was saying, listen to what other people are saying to you. Like if you see other people doing awesome things, congratulate them, like be like happy for them and like see the way that they succeeded. And then you know if that's something that you want, try replicate it. Or if you want to do something a little different, then do your own thing. I think listening is like really important, and then just you know getting rid of that urge to compare yourself to someone else.
That's really great too. Well, Jazz and Emma, thank you guys very much. This was really great.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. And we haven't had the conversation of whether or not any of you are going to be there in the current place and time when this airs on Tuesday, October 3rd. So maybe we'll have one of you around for a Q&A. If we don't, then any of the students hit us up, and then maybe Jazz and Emma are kind enough to want to give you some advice one-on-one. Nevertheless, Jazz and Emma, thank you very, very much. And I will toss it back to Paul in the present time. Welcome, everybody. All righty, guys, and we are back. We are live. We are shorter hair and different outfit than the video you just saw of me. And joined with me now is Greg Griffin, Executive Assistant to Cootie and Chike, the director duo behind Genius, every famous musician's music video ever, filmmaker, musical artist. Thank you for coming on in, Greg. And we also got Ana Gonzalez-Dorda here, producer, and long history of working in costumes on the biggest sets, including Marvel and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, Doom, Stranger Things, all that jazz. Greg and Ana, thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
My pleasure, man. Let's get it.
All right, let's get into it. All righty, so why don't let's start off, let's paint this picture for us all. We'll start with you, Ana. Kind of walk us through how you got into the biz. And might I say, before we get into it, one of the reasons Greg and Anna are both friends aside from coworkers at one space and time in this universe. But both of them bear this multi-hyphenate to their names, as I just said. And, Greg, filmmaker, musical artist, executive assistant, Anna, costumes, producer, overall storyteller. And so that's why I thought they'd be especially interesting to bring on in here, because they're very interesting creative backgrounds that shape the story. And now, with that being said, Anna, start off, bring us into your world and tell us about your stories.
Um, well, I'm originally from Venezuela. I do want to mention, and my family moved to Colorado. I went to school in Colorado. As soon as I graduated film school, I moved to Georgia because Georgia has a huge film industry. The amount of projects they shoot there is quite incredible. And I spent like a few months trying to figure out how to get in, and I got fortunate that like I got a background gig for Vampire Diaries. And then I started talking to the PAs of Vampire Diaries and being like, I don't want to be background, like I really want to be a set PA. And lucky enough, one of them thought I wasn't crazy and I could be good at it. And they brought me back the next day as an additional set PA. And I continued to be an additional set PA. And through that, I got to do that for multiple different projects. And then I got offered another position as being a costume PA on The Walking Dead. And through that job, I got asked to join the union and I became a costumer. And then, it just kept getting better and better from different shows there. And it really comes down to just like talking to people and being like, oh yeah, like I want to do this. And then someone might be like, oh wait, I'm looking for that. And that's really how I ended up here. And then eventually I moved down to LA and I was doing video editing out there for a nonprofit and slowly went back into doing costume design and also costuming. And then I got very lucky to meet people like Paul in LA, and we got to start producing our own projects. And that has been just an amazing ride.
Yeah, it's definitely been a lot of fun. And so how would you say, and Greg, I apologize, we'll jump to you in one moment, but Anna, how would you say like the difference of say the biz is between like a Georgia and LA? And is there a specific thing that you're like, I wish I could go back to Georgia, I like this element? And there's a specific thing about LA that you think there's a added benefit in a certain section?
I think the difference, if I went back to Georgia, I'll start with that. I wish I talked to more people outside of my department and networking more in those areas because this industry is strongly based out of network. And really, when I moved out to LA, I didn't talk to as many of the higher ups, like producers and stuff, that I could have created a network with. And I think I wish I did that more in Georgia because the lovely thing about Georgia, since it was like newer and there's so much going on, is an easier market to access. So it's easier to get your foot on the door, which in LA, I find that it can be more difficult if you don't have that network to begin with. And I'm going to keep going back to network because that's really the most important thing in our industry, to like go everywhere. And I also realizing that don't always just shoot for like whoever you think is like the most important on set. Like your network could be anybody, like I've gotten jobs out of the makeup artist that I became friends with, or even like, I was like a set PA and Paul was the assistant and we started working and producing things together. Like, so I think it's important to like, when I say network, not just to talk to like the director and the executive producer, like really put an effort to create these connections with everybody you work with. Because even at the time that you want to do your own thing, then you have a DP and you have a grip and you have a sound and people that you enjoy to work with. So yeah, I think that's what I wish I did differently in Atlanta. But the part that I love that LA has that Atlanta doesn't is those indies. Like nobody in Atlanta is really shooting their shorts or like trying to get their own project going. Everybody there is more working for this huge projects. They are fun and amazing, but I love the individual passion that I find in LA with people there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very cool. Very, very cool. And Greg is joining us from the Bahamas today, as his toes in the sand. Shoot on. He might be halfway into water right now. Greg, how we doing over there? Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, Paul, thank you so much reporting live from my virtual paradise over here. No, man, but man, I'm chilling, man. You know, it's a blessing and it's amazing to be here. You know, especially with people like yourself and like Anna. So I'm just passionate about great things and helping and moving forward and supporting and you know can't can't wait to see what comes about all this.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, thank you guys again for joining. And Greg, take us back because you have an extensive resume yourself and a lot of different ways in which you've gotten to where you are today, right? A lot of different corners turned,
Yeah.
even revolving around education, music. Let me hear more about that. Tell us about this.
You know what's wild? What I always say, Paul, is we always have a plan A. Never take your never take your eye off that light at the end of the tunnel where you want to get to. Now your road may be different. Don't be connected to how you get there. Just keep your eye there. My road is very similar to that. You know what I'm saying? Music is always at the forefront of anything that I do. You know what I'm saying? I'm a rapper, singer, songwriter, producer. That's what I do, man. You know what I'm saying? I never envisioned myself in film, but that's where we are. And you know, looking at some of the projects that I'm working on right now, it has the potential to truly bring together something that's special to the world, that's even bigger than what I ever thought of. And this is how I got there. Really, um, started off in high school. You know how everybody doing. Started making beats. Had a Radio Shack keyboard for, I don't know if none of the students out there remember Radio Shack, but store back in the day. I had a keyboard from Radio Shack, and I made beats on that. Started singing first, and I started rapping, and doing all that stuff. Performed at a talent show when I was young, and when I was a senior in high school. And before that talent show, I thought to put out a CD. I put out a CD, and before lunch which was like 2 hours, I sold 300 of them. It's never happened again since that day. But I sold a lot. I went home with this big wad of cash, and I was like, I'm done playing football. It's all about music. So fast forward that, I took the long route of, really just learning the industry, being in San Antonio, Texas, where I'm from, and doing every single thing that you could do locally to try to make it out. Been on the radio a bunch of times, down there, TV a bunch of times, magazines, newspapers, everything that you can think of, and nothing was working. So I said, I was getting a little older. I was like, man, I understand the industry a little bit better. I know I either need some help or I need some money. At the time, I was producing a lot, making beats for a lot of bigger name artists, but it was during the time where artists started to transition from buying beats directly from a producer, but going straight to like, YouTube, a SoundClick and stuff like that to try to get some, to try to get some music. So I was like, shoot, let me move to New York. So I moved to New York. I had a job working as a music teacher for the Harlem Children's Home, which eventually I became program coordinator and a director of that program. But eventually that's what I was. And 2 weeks in, I got sent to this workshop about how to make a music video. And was with these two guys, Cootie and Chike. This is back in 2013, in November 2013. And I had never heard of them, but they made music for every single artist that I could think of, including Kanye West, which was one of my favorite artists. And they made Through the Wire, and we sat there and they really sat down and like watched some of my music videos and listened to some of my music. And I think they was feeling it, but they video guys, they movie guys. What was they gonna do with that? They gave me their information, and through the years, I never took my mind off of music. That was always the course, stay the course on that. So I was doing a lot of great things and doing shows and open mics and stuff like that in New York. But I was also honing my craft with youth development work. And there was a couple people a couple film specialists that left our site. And when they left our site, they sent me back to school for film because I was full time and they wanted to get somebody. Now it was crazy that happened because I am legally blind. So me filming and doing that stuff, it but not a lot of people knew that at the time because of the way I carried myself. So I was like, well, I'm just gonna figure it out. Throughout this time, I'm living in Harlem. Chike lives in Harlem. So I would see him at the gym all the time. Cootie lived across the street from the art center that I worked at. So I would see these guys through the years all the time, and they both was just like, man, when we keep seeing somebody, it's meant for us to, bring you in. So after 4 years of continuously seeing them and emailing and, being persistent, they allowed me to come be a set PA, like much like Anna was saying, and I was working on their film, A Kid from Coney Island, and their film, Birth of a King, about Martin Luther King. And, just learned things throughout then, started writing stories for my students and filming them, showed it to Chike. At the time, he told me, yo, man, shooting is not your forte, so just never do that again. But you have a knack for telling stories, man, and writing and dialogue, and that's great. Well, I didn't have anyone to shoot for me, so I had to keep shooting. Fast forward a couple more years, I ran their Instagram. So if you guys go and see official Cootie and Chike on Instagram, I ran that, brought the followers up on that. Anything that they gave me, I just wanted to go extra hard and do extra great at it. But I had to keep shooting because that was what I got sent to school for. Eventually, I kept shooting. I did really good. Genius came out. When Genius came out, they invited me to the premiere. I was the only person that they allowed to shoot. I shot. I killed the recap video. It was amazing. Chike couldn't believe that I shot it, but I did. And after that, they asked me to come and be their executive assistant and learn everything that they know because they know I'm gonna be, something great. And eventually, during that journey of last year, still keeping music as the forefront, that Christmas, last Christmas I made like a little project because, like I said, keeping my, even though I'm doing this, music is always the focus. And they said, man, this can be a story that can come behind it. So, why don't you go to Sundance? They put me in the Sundance Institute for script writing, and I wrote a screenplay about a Christmas story to go with the music that I did. So that's currently what I'm working on in conjunction of. So everything's still mixed in together. And I kept my eye right on that music, and it's expanded into something that I never could have dreamt of at the beginning. So that's really my story, man. Quick version, even though it felt elongated, but it's a lot of years.
No, it's perfect.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah,
it's
that's
perfect.
That's where we at right now.
No, that's all very cool. And you guys double tapped on these ideas of the power of networking and being the squeaky wheel, so to speak, whether it be on talking to one of the set PAs and or the makeup artists, the costumes, whether it be people on set. Greg, you stalking Cootie and Chike into the gym. And I think describe a little bit for us. I think this is something that a lot of people go through. And I definitely went through it when I was like trying to reach out to people on LinkedIn. It's a very silver line between like networking and wanting to be that squeaky wheel, right? And on one side, you're like, I don't want to come across freaking weird. On the other side, like I know this is what I'm supposed to be doing, so I got to be doing it. How do you guys walk that line of like, how do you effectively, let's use those words, effectively kind of network and be that squeaky wheel without being overbearing, without being, a little domineering, and make it more transactional? How do you guys balance that beam? Anna, let's start with you.
I would say most of my networking has been done in person. So it's with people that I meet in person. And honestly, I find the best way to go by it is approach people like you just want to be friends and you just want to connect. And then the networking comes after that. Like, let it come naturally, because we all notice when somebody's just approaching you for a goal. Mm-hmm. And some people don't mind it, like just being told like what you need. But I think it's just having like the natural connection with people is good. I cannot imagine what it would be like to send cold emails. And I think even when you do cold emails, it always has to come from a genuine place, right? I think just be honest and don't be afraid to like keep reaching out. But I think kind of like, what Greg says is like always have like that goal of what you want in mind. So whenever whoever you talk to, like that part is clear. Nobody's gonna give you a position if you're like, oh well, I don't know. I think I would like to do this. Like it would be cool. Like I think you need to be very confident in yourself and what you also have to provide, right? Because even though networking is really what gets you out there, you need to be confident that you can also bring something to the table, right? That is different from what anybody else that is trying to talk to this higher up and trying to get a job from this person. So I think, yeah, just be confident, be yourself, and like and just shoot your shot,
Yeah.
Because it has something to say.
I think that's great. I definitely agree with just being genuine. Like, I think, that's first and foremost most important thing. Like I tell students or just peers, like, reach out to the people you actually have genuine interest in, and you feel like you have more to talk about than like basically framing a conversation of like, okay, now do this for me. But Greg, what do you think?
It's interesting that you say that, Paul, because I feel like the most important part of what I would say networking is the lateral network.
Right.
Part of my story, yes, we hear Cootie and Chike, but at the same time, I think there are important names that were right there with me, helping me get better at filming, with a guy like Rashard Leverett or, Hallie Rouse. These are the guys that are offering me opportunities that are standing right there with me. Or, when it was 3 weeks into me being a executive assistant, I believe, 3 weeks, and I met Paul. You know what I mean? And Paul is trying to get an interview with Cootie and Chike, and I'm doing my best to make sure that Paul can get that interview.
Greg did come through with that. I did not think that was gonna happen.
And it was not easy. I'm being honest with you. It was not easy, but that's what I'm in the industry to do. My main goal is to make it more easy for people like us, man, and never forget where that comes from. And at the end of all of it, Paul said, man, you know what? The next time you in LA, man, let's grab some coffee. And I came out to LA. I wasn't able to meet with him because I did like this Netflix fellowship thing that they had me in or something like that. But that really stuck with me. And I said, man, no matter what I'm doing with this guy, because I knew he was not just saying it just cause. And those type of relationships, or even being on the last call, the prep call that we had this with Anna, and I'm asking her questions as if I was like, yo, man, so what's it like making a costume for the Marvel universe? Like, I really don't know, because I'm working on a movie right now that's going to need those certain things. Who do y'all think the first person I'm gonna hit up? So, those, that's the most important part. Yes, it is important to network up, but that's not within your control. To me, I call it God. You can call it whatever you want to, but that's not within your control. I feel like what's in your control is what's in front of you. And, that's the students that that's your peers, the people that you right next to. So that's what I always try to connect to the most.
Yeah. And just to follow up that, because even like the people that I produce different films with in LA, like we're all kind of like lateral, but we all know we're climbing together. And so you never know when it's like someone that you helped out that you were like, oh, maybe, they climb this much and all they do is bring you up with them. And so, yeah, that's why I was kind of saying, like, it's important to just be nice and talk to everyone, because you never know who's going to be the person that can really help you out or that you can really help out. And it's like, it should be a mutual thing, right? So,
yeah, no, I 1000% agree. It's very much like a pay it forward biz. And, like what Greg was saying, whether it be like, our relationships, whether it be like my relationship with you, Anna, my relationship with you, Greg, and how wonderful they are. It's like when you find those people like that, pure horizontal networking, it's like you got to stick with those people. One, there's a lot of people you're not like, by the way. There's going to be a ton of people in this industry who aren't genuine, and you're like, get me the hell away from as fast as possible. But then two, when it comes to, building together. You're going to end up giving each other job recs. When Anna and I first met, and I told her that I just had to get rid of, unfortunately, like a DP I was working with on my short film, and I had no idea what the hell I was doing in terms of like what my next step was. Because I was like, I don't know anyone else. I think you can do this job for this project. And I met up with Anna, and she instantly was like, oh, well, I'll come on as a producer and help out. And actually, I know somebody who is like down with this genre who could kill it. So let's bring him on it too. And then boom, bada bang. So it's all about, just making that magic happen. And when you find your group, when you find the people that, you truly, enjoy working with and chatting with and being friends with, like, stick with those people through and through. And there's always going to be, steep learning curves where you can, ask questions to your peers and see what they have to think and get advice. And on that, what are some of, the challenges that each of you went through, or say your steepest learning curves navigating this obviously very fickle bitch of an industry? Why don't you start?
I think the biggest lesson I learned, I would say maybe it's like in two parts, like two things that I wish I really had when I first started is one to, there's going to be a lot of frustrating moments. You're going to work with a lot of people that you don't like, or you might deal with people above the line that are not the best. But I think always remembering that we get to do a cool thing at the end of the day, like, and just be appreciative of your job. I found myself at the beginning, like, sometimes really complaining about the hours and stuff like that. And that's not complaining and creates this like negative energy that like really consumes your life. And so I think you need to remember, what Greg says, like your goal, like your dream. Like no matter like when it's hard, just remember your dream and like remember like me, 7-year-old me will think it's insane that I'm living in LA and working in movies, like that's what she dreamed of. So who am I to like complain about it when like I got what I want?
Mm-hmm.
So there's always like a better perspective to put in things, because it's really just a perspective, and you can either go in the rabbit hole of being complaining for the little things, or just really be grateful and like and keep moving forward and keep talking to people. And if you're working with people that all they do is complain, then don't work with those people all the time, or like try to find a balance. And the other thing that I would say too, it's I forgot the second thing.
That's all right. Take your time. Take your time. Greg, if you'd like.
Yeah. Go ahead until I can.
All right. Let's hear it, Greg. Steepest learning curve for you over there.
Man, I think the steepest learning curve isn't anything tangible. The steepest learning curve is sitting across from people at times that may not get the vision that you see, but you have to believe so radically and be so crazy enough to continue to believe when those people doubt, and continue doing what you're doing. That is the biggest challenge, because you're going to sit across from these people that have all of these accolades and all of these things, and they're going to sit in front of you and say, man, what you trying to do is impossible. And you trying to say, man, look, man, I'm doing it right now. It's done. It's right here. You know what I'm saying? And you have to continue to keep that. That's been the biggest thing, my biggest challenge, because, although I am confident in a lot of things that I do, and I'm multi-hyphenated, but I also at the same time, I doubt myself. I come home and say, man, can I really pull this off? And it's like, yeah, bro, you can. So to me, I feel like you gotta stand strong on what you feel in your heart. You know what I'm saying? And just one foot in front of the other. That's the most difficult thing to do, is to never quit. But that's the only key to really winning in this industry, is to never quit, never give up. It'll take you everywhere you want to get to, man, but you can't quit. You can't stop. As long as you don't stop, your hand is still in the race. So that's what I would say.
Love that. I love that. I need to call Greg for my morning affirmations.
Yeah, no, we can have like a Zoom call every day and just be like, okay.
Yes,
Let's go.
Greg, tell us, please share us. I love it. No, that's
So
great.
I think the second thing I wanted to say kind of follows a little bit what Greg was saying. Is just that knowing when to listen and when to speak up, I think becomes very important in the industry, because as much as you should, I think you should always be open for like what people have to say, but also understanding when not necessarily listen to them. Like, if that makes sense, like everybody likes to give their opinion, but you don't always need to listen to it. So you need to be very confident and secure in like what you want. So you are able to be like, oh, that's such a good idea. Like that works better than what I thought worked best. And then when to be like, no, I think I got it.
Yeah, I gotta go now.
Yeah, I think like finding that balance, because not only like when you're creating stories and you're trying to pitch these ideas, but even like if you're working on set, and because being on set, you're collaborating with so many people. So even, as a costumer, it could be a designer, it could be a director, producer, and like really understanding when you need to like stand your ground, or like being like, what, like that what you're saying makes better sense, and move on. And so yeah, I think it's always important to be very open to like that collaboration, but staying true to yourself, because you're gonna meet so many people.
Mhm.
And I mean, going along also what Greg was saying is that if you're in a room of people that nobody believes in you, you're in the wrong room. This is not artists. It's like we're artists, right? Like, not everybody likes the same piece of art. We all have favorite movies, and that doesn't make any of our movies worse than the other. It's just because it's art, and it's very particular to each person and our own experience. So it's important to, again, going back to the people that you surround with, like be surrounded with people that like understand your vision and are there to support you, and not just like, because if you're surrounded by people that are just like, oh, I don't know, that's not good, that's gonna tear you down like bit by bit. You need to put yourself in better places.
100%. And so, unfortunately, we do got to wrap it up here, it sucks because I think I could sit here for the next 30 minutes. But let's leave one last question and answer for the people. Each of you, what's one piece of advice you would offer to, say, your younger self?
I mean, I feel like this whole conversation.
Right, but only one piece on it. Here it is. Hone it in.
For me, what I would say is two things: never quit, stay the course, and enjoy the moment. Be in the moment, man. You never gonna get this moment back. Enjoy it. What's for you is for you. No one can take that away from you. So don't be so focused on in front that you don't notice what's going on right now. And just stand in confidence. It's gonna happen. So just live in the moment.
I like that.
This is beautiful put.
I'm telling you, we'll stick to the morning routines here in a moment.
Yeah. I would say for me is just believe in yourself and like constantly work on yourself and like improve yourself. Like don't always count on people to like give you the hand. Like get yourself in that room. Don't be waiting for someone to open the door. Like open the door. Or there's a book that I read that has this concept of being like, be so good they cannot ignore you. So instead of like constantly like knocking on doors, you just like work on yourself and become so good that they don't have an option, like they have to like open the door for you. And yeah, and everything that Greg said too, like live in the moment is really important. I think we all get stuck a lot of times that, we want to be up here and we forget to enjoy the whole ride to there. Yeah.
1,000%. No, I really love that, guys. Well, thank you so much, Greg and Anna, for coming today. This was so fun. And from the bottom of my heart and from ODI, thank you so much for being a part of the conference and bestowing your wisdom upon us.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
All right. All righty, guys. How are we all doing? ODI, One Diverse Industry. We're back at it. You just saw the wonderful chat with Greg and Anna, Emma and Jazz. And now to wrap it up for the day today, I am accompanied by three fantastic individuals, mentors in my life and good friends as well. Paula Sabaga, writer. She wrote on Dynasty, Walker, also Alfredo Davia, an award-winning director, producer, and Dwan Fox, a producer. He did Whitney Houston's biopic, I Want to Dance with Somebody. I know everybody loves that. Come on now. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. How are we all doing?
Good.
Pretty good.
Doing
Nice
well,
to hear.
doing well.
Cool. Well, let's not mess around here. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's get right into this. Let's go around. Let's just paint the picture for the people. Why don't we start with you, Paula? Talk to us a little bit about what you do, where you came from, how you got to where you are today, and then we'll push it around the table. We'll move the talking.
All right. Feel free to interrupt me if this is taking too long. Hi, everybody. I'm Paula. I am originally from São Paulo, Brazil. I've been in LA for 11 years. I went to film school back home, worked in film and TV as a writer back home, and then decided to take 5 steps back and came here for grad school and I didn't leave. So worked in a few agencies for a bit, did internships on shows and production companies until I got my break as a showrunner's assistant on a show called The 100, worked there for a little bit. And at the same time, I got into a writing fellowship that CBS offers every year. And while I was doing this fellowship and wrapping up on The 100 on my assistant capacities, I got an offer from CBS, from the people in the program, to staff on a show called Dynasty, which is the remake of a very famous soap in America. I'm from the land of soaps. I am currently watching one right now. Not now, but yeah. And I took it. It was the best experience I could have ever had. I was there for about 3 years. Then my contract was up and I wanted to do something else that wouldn't put me in a position to be super high on a level, but only know how to do one thing, which would be that show. So I went for a show called Walker, then did that for a year. At the same time I met Paul, we were developing a feature, which then turned into a TV show, then turned into a pitch, that turned into a lot of things, but we've been back and forth on that project for a bit. Mm-hmm. And yeah. And then last thing I did before the strike was I was in a mini room for an NBC show that has yet to hear if it's getting picked up or not. But that is the spiel of me reading my resume out loud. I'm more than this, guys, but this is what it is.
Well, we'll get into 60% of it, Paul, and we'll let you keep the other 40% near and dear. But all very cool stuff. Dwan, let's hear from you. Why don't you bring us in here? Why don't you sing a little Whitney Houston?
Oh gosh. Oh, funny. So let's see. I got into this through art school. I transferred from painting and drawing into filmmaking, and started working in Chicago. Worked my way up from being a PA up to into the grip and electric department to like still doing my own projects. So I was producing my own stuff. And then I wound up continuing my education, went to AFI, had a little hiatus. So, getting a lot of doing the circus act, right? Jumping in from different things, hitting life from a bunch of different corners. But I wound up in grad school at AFI, which is where I guess I would say everything really started in LA, and graduated AFI. And while I was in AFI, during the summer, I would hit the job board and I would take these crazy projects of, we got $10,000, we want to produce a full feature, So I would take it, and because, I needed to work. And so by the time I got out of AFI, people were calling me to produce and line produce projects for them. So I got really fortunate. I mean, a lot of hard work. But I came out of AFI producing 2 projects a year. Now I'm somewhere in 2 to 3 projects a year. And really living off of the indie circuit for all that time. And I guess in the last 3-4 years, I've moved into the studio system, which has gotten me projects like the Whitney Houston, working on the Whitney Houston project. Was also a producer on line producer on The Blackening, which came out over the summer. Another one that I really liked was a movie with Thandaway Newton called God's Country.
Mm-hmm.
And and then I've been working with Blumhouse at the moment. So yeah, that's there's a whole bunch of other little crevices of stuff of that kind of led the path. I took a hiatus from film and went into the Army, where I kind of.
I'm a big fan of the Blackening, by the way. Just wanted to let you know.
Oh, cool. Oh, excellent.
Carry on. I'm sorry. It's a very good movie.
No worries. No worries. So I got a little crash course in management, 6 years in the Army. I left filmmaking.
Yeah, I'm sure they placed a lot of instructional management in you.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a crash course for sure. But
cool.
Yeah, an adventure. So yeah.
There you go. The questions are already jumping off at me, and I'm totally going to skew away from the questions I already sent through to you guys, but it's totally okay. I'll keep it safe here. Alfredo, walk us into your life quite a bit over there.
Oh God, it's really different from Paula and Duan. I mean, I know Duan because we've done a lot of advertising together, and we just finished a TV show, so we kind of go not way back, but we go like 2014 back type of thing.
That's way back.
That's way back. So I'm a little bit like Paula. I'm from Mexico originally, but I finished high school here in the U.S. in Florida. And that's where I did my undergrad, and I did some film classes there. And eventually, right after, in Florida, it's not what, especially in Miami, it's not what it is now. It's actually now an industry. Back then it was a big nothing. So I decided to go to film school, and I got into Columbia in New York. So I moved to New York, and I ended up spending a lot of time in New York, where I did my first film. We shot it right before 9/11. It was a micro-budget film that was shot in Washington Heights, called Washington Heights, actually, with a lot of great actors who were not names back then, but subsequently, became really work. A lot of them are kind of names now, or they're really working actors. Then, throughout that time in New York, the indie world was alive, but you couldn't necessarily make like a living from it. So I was essentially broke. So I got into advertising agencies just by freelancing there, and eventually got hired full time. So I actually had like kind of 2 parallel careers, one in advertising, working for worldwide agencies, and then doing my indie films on the side. Eventually, what happened is that first film, it won the LA Film Festival, what was called the IFP back then. And then it did Tribeca and a bunch of other festivals, and eventually got me a job to direct a movie for Sony. Back then, the DVD market was very important. So I did a film that was essentially a straight-to-DVD release back then. It was in 2005 or 6, I don't remember. But then it did theatrical on foreign markets. It was a dance movie. It was actually a pretty bad movie, but it was actually a lot of fun to shoot, because it's kind of where I learned. I mean, like to really kind of direct and tell stories that weren't mine. In that case, I was just basically work for hire. And how to make the best possible story that I could, given the material. And then from there, by then I quit advertising full time. But what I did is I was on the agency side, and then I started essentially directing commercials. So I, again, developed kind of those 2 parallel tracks. So that ironically, what got me to the DGA was commercials. And that's what, by then I had essentially 2 kids, so that's what paid the bills for a long time. And then eventually, that producer who hired me to do that second film, I had been writing what was supposed to be my second film. It was a small movie that we shot again in Manhattan with, a wonderful actress named Heather Graham. So we shot that in like 12 days because that producer got me the money to do this. This is before digital. So it's a very different world back then, like 80% of your budget went to, film allocation and development and whatnot. And cameras, they were very expensive back then. So we shot that in like 12 days, and that movie did fairly well. It went to Sundance, and then essentially got me to my first studio movie. It was a Christmas movie called Nothing Like the Holidays that I think came out in 2009 or 2010. I don't remember. And that was like a big Christmas movie with a really nice cast. Among them, it was like John Leguizamo, Alfred Molina, Elizabeth Peña, who I did 2 films with. She's unfortunately passed since. Freddy Rodriguez, Jay Hernandez, just a really Louis from the Hood. Sorry, I forgot his last name. Louis.
Louis, no, seriously, we do know him. Louis, that's
yeah. So, and that was a lot of fun. And I realized that studios basically had no idea how to make movies. Like, under a certain threshold, they're basically clueless. I thought all the time, oh my God, they know something I don't. And I was like, no, they don't, not even close. From there, I became close with Leguizamo. So we did a film based on one of his one-man plays. The one-man play was called Ghetto Clown. We adapted that into a film and did it. And then, to be honest, because independent film went kind of down the tubes during the financial crisis, or one of the blowbacks of the financial crisis, that independent money just was nowhere to be found. So I basically just went back to advertising and started doing tons of. But back then, advertising changed because it went from just straight up 30-second commercials to the nasty word we heard during the strike today, which was content, right? Everything was basically, that's kind of where I met Duan doing that kind of content. We would get these orders to do not just a commercial, but a 3-minute film or a 5-minute documentary and all that stuff. So we were there right during that change. And I still do a lot of that, to be honest. That's and then during one of those assignments, my company, we shot like a little short video overnight. We just asked the crew to stay, and it became the basis of this. First, it was a series of digital shorts that we did for AMC, a show called Cooper's Bar. So the first season was small webisodes that Duan came in and helped us. He produced it. And then the second season, which we're actually in the middle of delivering, is now a half-hour TV show for linear, for IFC. Still small, but now, who knows if there's going to be a season 3? We'll see. Everything's changed in the TV landscape. But that's essentially a little bit, of my story.
Very, very cool.
And what was really... When you talk about that strange content, I remember that Nest hidden camera thing that we did.
Yes.
Where we basically had to make a fake restaurant and bring all these people in, so they think that they're coming for this free meal by this really, interesting chef. And then at the end of the meal, they drink some coffee, and it's like, well, what do you think about the coffee? It was pretty funny.
I have no idea what that concept actually means.
It actually came decent, but it's like, can you imagine you have a nice meal and then they give you Nescafe? I grew up in Mexico, so Nescafe was kind of like the only coffee available, so you get used to it. But it tastes terrible. It's like eating sand. it's just
And
awful.
everybody was like, "Oh, this is amazing!" Oh, because they don't know it's Nescafe, so they're all, "Oh my God, it's the," you know.
Get the close up. Get the close up on that.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry
Yeah.
about that. I
No,
know
you're
that's
good. You're good. And so take us back to say like that first gig, that first foot in the door, and get a little more granular for us on how you achieved that. What was it networking? Was it a friend knew a friend, application? Duan, why don't we start with you? How'd you get that first gig? What was that first gig?
Oh wow.
Take us back.
When you say foot in the door,
Mhm.
I mean, there's so many I think there are three for mine. There are three like
NEFE.
doors, right? Or there's always a level above the level you're at. So how about that? So I would say the level that really started supporting my family, right? There's that level, right? And so I think that was when I started working with Catchlight. Well, no, I mean, okay, sorry. Okay, so well, there was a level with where I went in to meet with a head of production at Blumhouse, and and it was just take the meeting, and it was based on my name. It got passed to her through people, Jeanette Vittorio, when she was at Blumhouse. So I went in and I met with her. We had a great meeting. Nothing came of it, outside of, she knows I exist now.
Yeah.
Right. So she leaves Blumhouse, starts her own company, and with a couple of influential other people who've been in the industry as long as she had, her peers. Four of them formed their own company that all these deals to make movies, and then they called me in because they wanted to, because number one, they want somebody who still knows how to make movies at a particular price point. And and I came in, and so I did 3 movies back to back with them, and one of which was The Blackening. And so from there, then I'm bouncing over to a bunch of other places. Another one that together was we did something with MRC, who did Knives Out. We did something with AGC. We did something with let's see, what was the last one? But so that's how, like, you got to take all the meetings, and you can be very, let that fuel you, but know that maybe nothing will come of it at the moment, but every opportunity, every meeting, every relationship will eventually come back around. And so, like, even my wife knows now. She's like, "Oh yeah, now you see how long that took to pay off," and she'll go do this because it's going to come back around. So,
Yeah. No, that's great. Very snowball like. You just gotta hit everything, and at one point it's gonna flip.
Yeah.
Very cool. Paula, what are you thinking over there?
I'm just I was gonna add to this because I just lost my train of thought. It was so great. And shit, what were you? It was so
You
good.
take the meeting. It may not.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't believe in like fate or like things. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. I mean, I believe it. I don't manifest it or whatever it is, but I do believe that if I go and look at a job I had, I can backtrack a lot of steps that took me there, and a lot of those are in the meetings that you take, and then a year later they pay off, and then it's like, oh yeah, I got this because I got this because I got this because I got this because I met this, because it's very interesting. So that is what I wanted to add.
Which is why I think one of the questions you had asked us back in earlier when we were talking before is when we talk about building your network, building your peers. That's where those meetings first start. It's like your peers,
Yeah.
and just getting to know everybody, going out to the parties, being on the scene while you can be on the scene, getting your name out there, remembering that everything you do is going to reflect on you and it's going to come back, and they be like, oh, that dude is a pain to work with, or I loved working with him, so so you gotta.
A lot
Yeah,
of what Paula you call the horizontal networking, right?
yeah, networking sideways.
Networking sideways. All right, I like that better. No,
Yeah.
I think that's definitely fair. And like even if, even for someone say getting out of college, it matters to talk to everybody on the set. Like if say a 20-year-old works on a set as a PA, sure they want to meet the producers, the director, and they want to strike a conversation, but they can't go out and, create their own projects unless they have the sound guy, unless they have the grip, the electric, unless they have another PA who maybe is interested in producing, wants to be a part of it, a DP, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, I love that idea of just, not only, crafting your way in this certain direction, but also just, going out and putting yourself in the place just to meet everybody, and starting those relationships in an organic way to, just take some meetings. I like
Yeah,
that.
I think it's like aim high, but really walk on the ground. Like be with the people that step the same floor as you, but you're always aiming high.
Right. Alfredo, what are you thinking over there? What would you say really helped you kind of break into your own in the earliest stages of your career and break into the industry?
Well, again, I came in New York. I came of age in New York, if you will, industry-wise. So it was very different. I think something that Duan and Paula just mentioned, I think is important, is kind of find what I would term is find your tribe. I know that's a little bit of a cliche nowadays, but I think it's really important when you step into any kind of situation, kind of find the people that you feel comfortable with, whatever, that you can have a beer with afterwards. And because that's essentially how you build it. When we did our first feature, we didn't, we had gone to the filmmakers lab, the Sundance Filmmakers Lab, with a script that I had written with a friend of mine, him and I wrote this, what eventually became Washington Heights. But we couldn't, that script, because it had traction from the Sundance Filmmakers Lab, again, at a time where independent films were viable, especially in New York. We couldn't connect it, meaning we couldn't get it made for, it was a tiny drama film, or dramatic film. And then essentially by meeting kind of friends on sets, or I would do a lot of theater back then as well in New York, a lot of independent theater, like off Broadway. We're doing La Mamas, we're doing all kinds of different venues and dealing with all those actors. So one day I turned to my co-writer and we're like, why don't just fucking write a script that we can shoot it ourselves, Now, this was at the beginning of the digital revolution. So a movie called Celebration had come out. It's a Danish film. It's one of the most important dogma films. It's a great film if you haven't seen it, by director Thomas Vinterberg. But that kind of changed our perception of video, because back then video was the poor man's companion to film. So we got a Canon XL1 that was kind of true and tested with Fujifilm lenses. And essentially, I went to a couple of parties and I raised about $65,000 just from one of my ex-roommates was a Wall Street guy. So just kind of going there, and we raised 65, and that eventually turned to 120. And we shot that in 18 days. We wrote the roles for actors that were friend of ours. We had a casting director, but not really, in other words, it was just, hey, he'll be really good. Yeah, come in and see, and we shot it that way. So we just kind of had to create it from scratch. We didn't, at the end of the day, I was one of the producers, in quotations. I didn't make a dime on that film, but you know, it was just a way to get it made, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to like we didn't make it under any other company, and then we sold it. We sold it to Lionsgate here in LA when we won that LA Film Festival. So so I don't know that. So it was a very different thing. I never had to go in and much later in my career, I had to pitch myself for works for hire. You know, uh, and yeah, I would say how did I get those meetings? Honestly, it was through agents at that time. But I kind of knew somebody who knew somebody, and that you know those kind of networks always they always help because they're like, okay, this guy is not crazy. You know what I mean? That's important. Um, but you know, it's funny. I mean, most of my projects have been kind of that path. You know, it's not like I go and knock on a door. It's either, you know, raise the money and do it ourselves, or through advertising, we have a little more time and shoot it ourselves that way.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, hey, that's where it all seems to be coming down to for each of you. This idea of just keeping the peers close and keeping the network cast wide. And so let's think a little bit about today. And obviously, the industry is going through quite some changes. In other words, and where do you guys foresee? You know, you walked us through sort of like how you got in and how you broke down that door. What do you foresee, you know, from your own given positions, writer, director, producer, as where the industry's going? And as a student today, someone who's say like early 20s, you know, young professional, mid 20s, whichever, what would, if you were coming up now, would you tell yourself like these are the things you should be doing and actively working on given what today's accessibility, where you think things are headed, who the hell knows that answer, not me. But we all have our great guesses. What would you guys say? You tell yourself, Paula, do we want to start with you over here?
Let me think.
You think, Dewan looks at
Yeah,
you. Dewan, hit us with
I think that there's a huge advantage to today's generation of filmmaker, and that is that you guys have social media, and you don't need all the bells and whistles that we needed. Like, you know, you can pull out a camera and shoot now. You can shoot a movie on your phone, for God's sake, and then your gimbal is only going to cost you a couple $100, or so like you can make a movie, you can make content, and you understand what the studios and all the mini majors are chasing you guys. That's the reality of it. They're trying to find the next you, right? And so you should just go out and do what you do with your people, make your content, put it online, get all your hits, and then guess what? Oh my God, they're going to be chasing you, because that's what they do. They're chasing. They're always chasing. And so it's like, just go out and do what you do.
Yeah, not to interrupt you, but I just totally wholeheartedly subscribe to that idea. I think the industry is I know it's, it's kind of cliche to say the industry is broken, but it really, if you look at it, if you've done any kind of film history or have an understanding of what happened during the 20th century and what is happening today, if you read the newspaper, you can kind of put all the dots together, because at the end of the day, you have to react to that, right? So it's like, look, we used to make movies, essentially movies after, if you've seen that film about the silent period, I forget the name of it, with Brad Pitt, but it's not a good film. But what's interesting about it is how it shows you how crazy the silent period was in this country, right? It was basically the wild, wild west. It was rock and roll. It was punk all the way. And then he got industrialized, especially during the talkies, right? And he got industrialized. And of course, World War II helped, and the financial crisis of 29 helped. And he got scaled up. So the processes that were essentially created during that time were essentially just like, the Model T from Ford was scaled up. It was so that you took an artisan out of it and made it into a industrial process, right? Because and then that led to a lot of money. It formed a real industry, and that industry supported essentially middle class jobs throughout the chain of the value chain, as from a business terminology, right? Anybody who had a value got a commensurate, amount of money, right? That led to a middle class earnings, or if you're lucky, a higher class. However, I think, technology first it disrupted very, very strongly the music industry. And then now the disruption is very, very strongly felt in the movies and TV industry. And that value chain, I think, does not exist. There's not enough support on the back end to financial support to manifest or to sort of pay for that value chain. So I think is to start going or trying to get into a system of how things were done essentially 100 years ago. I think it's a disaster. I think especially you guys are beginning your careers or you're coming out of school, you have to be wiser than that. If I was talking to my 20-year-old self, I will immediately say that, like shape up, get up, smell the coffee, because you're either going to be disrupted or you're going to be the source of disruption. So you have to think about where you're going to be in that sort of, dialectics of history, right? I think, it's time to do things differently. I think what Duan has mentioned is right. The industry is chasing, the younger generation because they know they're competing with TikTok and Instagram and all the stuff we all know, YouTube, and it's impossible to compete with that. And of course, the video game industry is far more buoyant, is far more profitable than the movie and TV industry as a whole. So I think I think movies and TVs are moving into another realm. It doesn't mean they're going to disappear, because I don't think they'll ever disappear. But you have to understand, you have to get ahead of what that change is going to be, and get ahead of it. Because if you can get ahead of it, you can get there first. Totally. I don't know. I'm just like a raving lunatic here, but that's
no. I love it.
For instance, I was sitting in my room one day and I said, my God, what if I created a library where I could watch whatever movie I wanted to watch whenever I wanted to watch it, and everybody had access to it. And I swear, 2 years later, Netflix comes out and I'm like, see?
God damn it, Maud.
No.
God damn it. No, Fredo, I think that's so great, because one thing I think is like a young professional or students coming out now is it's like what you said is, you can't be chasing what was the system 5-10 years ago. I speak with like a ton of my friends now who, obviously we're all navigating the biz as a group here, all of us. And I'll tell them, especially like a couple of friends who are younger, like, there's not a safe bet anymore. Like, you just can't, like, guess what? Now, obviously, it's been very evident of the last year. You work for Disney, that doesn't mean you're any safer than being an independent adjacent to the system. Like, sure, maybe for the time being, you'll feel like, oh, okay, this is nice. I get my taxes pulled out every year from them. But it's, everyone has to be working for themselves and adapting to what the concept of disruption is in the time and the ever change of that. Paul, what are you thinking over there? I see you. I see
no, you. No. I'm thinking at the point of view of a writer, right? I don't make things, so I think about it differently, but I agree at the same time. I think there's one instance that I can think about that trying to mimic something helps, which is when you're in a writer's room, right? When you're in a writer's room, all you have to do is mimic your boss's voice. I know it's not the system. I know it's not creating new things and everything like this. But I do think that there is some merit if you want to go through that route of knowing how someone else does it, not how the system works, but how someone else does it, someone that has the same point of view as you maybe, and also doing your own thing so that you're ready to work for someone. In my case, that's all I've done and all I kind of want to do. And then you have your own thing to be ahead of the curve. I'm never ahead of the curve. I think, yeah, no, I don't. I probably have a Walkman still, but I think there's some sort of, I have a thing that you only know you're ahead of the curve when you see that people are chasing you. So I don't know if how tangible being ahead of the curve can be for us to quantify. It's like, I am ahead. So I agree with that. Do whatever the fuck you love. Do what makes you happy, but don't necessarily also expect the immediate results or anything, but learn from it, because I also come from a mindset that you don't want to look back and remember when you peaked. You know, you want to believe that you're peaking, that you haven't seen where you peaked yet. So yes, it works. It's awesome. Move on, do something better. It's great. It's awesome. Move on, do something better. Don't stick to the one thing that's going to make you or break you, because it's way more than one thing. That was my spiel that makes no sense.
No, it does make sense. I love that. It's also kind of, roots itself in the idea of like, keep your eggs in multiple baskets and understand the versatility and how to be dynamic and, decide to warm up one of those eggs one day until it's ready to hatch and then move on when it's time. I think that's really great. And
I think there's also the metaphor that someone used for me that I thought was very interesting is that you're juggling a lot of different balls. You just have to know which one is the plastic one that you can drop and which one is the glass one that you have to keep. And I think that's how you do it. You have to keep your eggs in a basket, but there's some eggs that you can just like go off and hatch. I'm not interested in that anymore, and it's okay.
If I can just add a little bit more to that. Paul, you were talking about your peer group, and I immediately thought, which is what we always say, the assistants, those are the gatekeepers, and those are the next studio heads. Those are the next execs. So you got to know that even if you're starting on the bottom, you just got to stick in there. You just got to keep moving and keep doing your thing, because it will move. It does move. That's the thing about our industry, which is great. People come and go, and the people who are next are the ones that are doing it, are the ones that are in there. So you got to learn the craft, which is what you're saying, Paul. Learn the craft. Be good at what you do. So don't just be trying to chase it or trying to create something different. Be good at something, and because that's really where your value is that you're good at something.
Right.
So
yeah, and that can take years to develop your voice. I agree with you, both of you. It can take years, and you have to be just patient, and it's not going to come overnight, but it will come. It will come just as you grow into yourself. It will come into, what essentially you're interested, or somehow it's a mystery. It's creativity, I think.
Overnight success.
It just happens, right? You have to be, when the right opportunity arrives, you have to kind of be ready. My thinking is just that I think it's to try to chase and embrace a system that's, I think, essentially, in very right now in very sort of in revolutionary ways is changing. It's just, because it doesn't affect the entire population. It's not written so much in the New York Times, right? But the changes are real. And this industry isn't the only one that's dealing with similar changes. I mean, I've worked, I've done a lot of work for heavy industries, mining, oil, fisheries, industrial agriculture. And I can tell you that all those industries are going through a similar change. I think the change is worldwide, so, and I think
the change is economy, and that's what's doing it, everybody.
It's worldwide. I think it's technology. I think COVID didn't help. It's just, so you can either be afraid of it or try to just, really push in that direction and figure it out. I know that's kind of vague, but if I knew, I would be the richest man in the world. And I wouldn't be here, but everybody has to figure out what that is anyway.
I mean, the word I is another word for change, right? It's like I means change. So I've always kind of like really held that as like, don't get too rigid. Always be ready to change. Always know that it's going to change. So,
There you go. There you go. And for you guys, obviously, like, especially in this industry, and as we talked about, every place, everywhere in the world as a whole, with being able to identify disruption and how to adapt and how to, attempt at getting ahead of the curve in any way possible, given, the craft that you've been perfecting. Taking us back, and unfortunately, I got to wind it down here, which sucks. I think we could get another hour in here, but to leave it with one thing, where has been, say, like that largest moment of disruption or say challenge or a learning curve in each of your guys' careers, and how did you sort of sidestep, overcome? Let's hear that tomorrow. Let's hear.
No. I mean, the problem was that I lived so long in the indie world that, there's two different worlds. And then when I got into the studio world, for me, that was a change. That was a big learning curve, because the indie world, as a producer, line producer, UPM, what you create a project from the ground level, and it's you and 2 to 3 other people, right? 2 to 3 other producers. You know how to talk to the guilds yourself. You know how to do copyright. You know how to set up the paperwork. You know how to do the finance agreements. Or you learn how to do those through the years. How to get all the contracts together and all that. Then you move into the studio system and you realize that, well, a person that knows how to do all of that actually has a little bit more power than other people, because the rest of the people who came up in the studio system don't know how to do that, because it's all compartmentalized and oh, you don't talk to the guild. I'm like, yeah, but my boy's over at the guild. If you want me to get to, if we want to change it, let me talk to my boy. But they compartmentalize everything so that, they go, what do you know about, finance agreement? They're like, well, what do you mean? So that for me was my biggest learning curve, is learning. And then when I talk to people who came up in the studio system, they get really scared because things change. They get pushed out of the studio system, and then they don't know how to survive because they haven't been, gritty, and they don't know how to put something together from the ground up.
Right.
So that's why I kind of laugh. But
fair. Oh, what are you thinking over there?
I'm thinking it's very specific. I don't know if anybody who's listening is an immigrant, but for me, I went to grad school. I did some internships and worked a year at WME, which was an agency, because I knew that I needed to learn the business part. I knew the TV part because I grew up watching it, but I needed to know how the business part worked. And I did a year of very, very tough work, but I finally got pretty great opportunity. One of the agents there said, one of my clients is looking for an assistant. It's a show called Guilt. I was like, heck yeah, let's do it. I left WME. I worked for them for about 2 weeks, and then immigration sent me a letter saying that my petition had been put in pause. So I wasn't allowed to work for them anymore until that was solved, which was solved 5 months after. Jesus. So how did I deal? I started smoking, but also I think I also knew that the only reason that wasn't working out was because of that one thing. I knew it because I've worked with people that I knew was going to hire me. And also at the same time, I needed to write shit. So I was like, okay, I'm going to take this opportunity and I'm going to write something new. And I didn't, because I was feeling like shit. And it's okay. I think the important thing, and honestly, this whole thing comes from like, it's to be able to forgive yourself for when you don't do the things that you think you should. You know, I didn't have the mindset to write anything. I didn't. And then and it was because of someone sideways who was also an assistant at WME while I was there, but 5 months prior, emailed me and said, hey, are you still looking for a gig after this whole ordeal with the visa worked out? I was like, because I have someone for you. So as soon as the visa came, I got another job instantly. And I knew it was like, okay, know when to give up and know when to be okay, not to be hard on yourself. And I knew I shouldn't have given up being a writer at that time yet. But I also knew, and now I know better, that sometimes not doing what you dream of doing when you're not in the good headspace to do it is better than actually having it done.
That's great advice. That's great. Yeah, because it's so easy to get like caught up, in this industry that's full of dreams and aspirations, and like always feeling that way.
Yeah, every time, like, and also understand what you can and cannot offer, and don't force the other part if you can't. Like, every time I hear someone say, oh, I wrote 3 pilots this year, I want to just like, how is it possible? But I know that I'm not that person. I'm not the person that's going to come out with 11 projects every year. I'm someone who is going to very much focus on one thing and very much focus on my job to do the other thing. And that's it. And I know that that's what I thrive at. And knowing your limitations, and I'm saying limitations in a good way, not in a way that takes you, but in a way that how much can you expend of yourself? It's very important.
Yeah, no, definitely fair enough. Bandwidth issues. That's like the ticking time bomb, I think, of working in the biz, because you want to be everywhere at the same time,
And prioritize. I knew that I wasn't going to work in an agency. I knew that's not what I wanted to do, but I also knew that I needed that was something that was really going to help me get the next job. So I put all my efforts there, because that's something I could track. And then once I was on the right track, then I went and did the stuff I wanted to do. Sometimes you don't prioritize yourself, and it's actually prioritizing yourself in the long term.
I think what Paula just mentioned, I think it's super important. If you can track it, if you can measure it, especially in this industry that's so amorphous, you can at least, not lie to yourself, because you can just kind of say, okay, I know that this and this eventually can get me this. I think that's important, as opposed to living in this fantasy that, well, it might happen, it might not, who knows, So I think I think that's really, really wise, Paula. Yeah, absolutely. If you can measure it.
Oh my God, thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's really great. Cool. Well, guys, unfortunately, our time has come. Even though I'd love to keep you here and disrupt your days for longer, I'll let you get out of here. But from the bottom of my heart and all of ODI, the 3 of you, thank you so much for being a part of this year's conference and for coming on the chat with me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Paul, and good luck, guys. Have fun at the rest of it. Had a really, really, really good time here. Bye.
Yep.
I'm glad.
Bye.
All right, thanks, guys. And for the rest of ODI, ODI, One Diverse Industry Conference 2023 will be on tomorrow, the next day, and Friday. So be sure to check your emails, continue to hang out with us, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.